My name is Anderson, and what I am about to share with you is not just a story. It's a revelation that changed my life forever. Until this moment, I never believed in near-death experiences. I considered them illusions, dreams of a desperate mind grasping for meaning. But when I found myself standing outside my own body, staring at the broken remains of the life I once knew, I realized that everything I had believed about the world was a lie. It all started on what seemed like an ordinary day. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the city with golden light. I was rushing to a meeting, distracted by emails, social media, and the endless cycle of daily worries. Like everyone else, I was caught in the race for success, always thinking about the next goal, the next dollar, the next achievement. Little did I know that, in a matter of moments, everything I thought mattered would become meaningless. 1 second, I was waiting at a stoplight. The next, I was weightless, detached from the reality I had known my entire life. Below me, my car was crumpled, smoke rising from the wreckage. I saw my own body slumped over the wheel, motionless, blood trickling down my forehead. I should have felt fear, panic, or pain, but instead, there was only silence, a deep, overwhelming stillness that wrapped around me like a void. Then, I felt it. A pull, a force greater than anything I had ever known, drawing me away from the shattered remnants of my earthly existence. Before I could process what was happening, I was gone. The world I knew faded into darkness, and I found myself in a space beyond time, beyond matter, beyond comprehension. That was the moment I realized the truth. I was dead, but death was not the end. It was only the beginning of something far greater. As I drifted through the void, I became aware of a presence, a light that called to me, not with words, but with something deeper, something I could feel in every fiber of my being. It was warm, powerful, alive, and as I moved toward it, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was about to witness something beyond human understanding. What I saw, what I experienced in those moments beyond the veil, changed everything I thought I knew about life, about death, and about the forces that truly control this world. And now, I have no choice but to share this truth with you, because time is running out. What I saw is coming, and those who are unprepared will be left behind. You need to hear this, not because it's a story, but because it's a warning. What you believe about reality is only a fraction of the truth. The battle for our souls is real, and the time to awaken is now. Listen closely, because what I'm about to reveal may be the most important thing you'll ever hear. The moment I realized I was no longer in my body was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't like waking up from a dream or drifting into unconsciousness. It was as if I had stepped out of a suit I never even knew I was wearing. 1 second, I was inside my car, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding. The next, I was above it all, an observer rather than a participant. My physical form remained trapped in the wreckage below, blood pooling around me. But I felt nothing. No pain, no fear, no breath. It was as if I had been severed from everything I had once known, yet I still existed. I still was. That was the first terrifying realization, that I was more than my body. As I hovered above the scene, watching the chaos unfold, I saw people rushing toward my car. Some were shouting, some were calling for help, and others simply stared in horror. Their reactions should have shaken me, but instead, I felt an eerie detachment. The world seemed muted, as if I were watching through thick glass. The weight of my past life, the worries, the ambitions, the regrets, felt distant, almost meaningless. That was when I noticed something else. The air around me, or whatever this space was, felt charged. There was an unseen current pulling at me, urging me to let go, to move toward something unseen. At first, I fought it. The instinct to hold on to life, to return to the body I had always known, was strong. But no matter how much I willed myself to wake up, to move, to breathe, it was useless. My body remained lifeless. My existence had changed in a way that could not be undone. The more I resisted, the stronger the pull became, like a tide dragging me out to sea. And then, I heard it. A sound faint at first, like distant chimes carried by the wind. It was both beautiful and haunting. A melody that resonated deep within me. That was when I knew. I was being called. The world around me began to shift. The streets, The people, the wreckage of my car, it all started to blur and dissolve, as if reality itself was unraveling. Darkness crept in, swallowing everything I had ever known. But this was no ordinary darkness. It wasn't the absence of light. It was something deeper, something alive. It pulsed and shifted around me, not cold or empty, but vast and endless. It was as if I had stepped into a void beyond space and time, a place where existence itself had paused. There was no up, no down, no sense of direction, only the awareness that I was. For a moment, I thought this was the end, that perhaps this was all there was, eternal nothingness. But then, out of the void, came something else, a presence. I couldn't see it, not with my eyes, but I could feel it. It was watching me, waiting. There was no voice, no words, but an undeniable understanding. I was not alone. And just as that realization set in, the darkness around me began to move. Shapes, figures, something unseen but undeniably real, shifting in the abyss. My mind could barely comprehend it, but my soul recognized it. This was not just an empty space. It was a passage, and I was being taken somewhere beyond anything I had ever imagined. The pull became stronger, no longer just an unseen force, but a presence, guiding me forward. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't resist. I was being taken deeper into the unknown, into the very fabric of what lay beyond life. And as I surrendered to it, something happened, something that shattered everything I had ever believed about the nature of existence. I saw the light. It started as a distant glow, barely visible against the darkness, but it grew, expanding, filling the void with an intensity that was both overwhelming and welcoming. It wasn't just light, it was alive. It carried warmth, power, something far beyond human understanding. And as I was drawn toward it, I felt something I hadn't felt since the moment I left my body. Peace. But this was no ordinary peace. This was something deeper, something eternal. I was going somewhere beyond death. Somewhere I had never imagined was real, and what I was about to see would change everything. The pull toward the light was irresistible. It wasn't something I chose. It was something that chose me. The moment I stopped resisting, the darkness around me seemed to dissolve, giving way to something far greater than I had ever known. I was moving, but not in the way I had ever moved before. There was no gravity, no sensation of walking or flying. It was as if I was being drawn forward, pulled by an unseen force that guided me effortlessly through the unknown. And as I traveled, I realized I was not just heading toward the light, I was becoming part of it. The space around me shimmered with colors I had never seen before, hues that didn't exist in the physical world. Gold, silver, deep blues and purples, shades that pulsed and shifted like living energy. It was unlike anything I had ever encountered, yet it felt familiar, as if I had known this place all along but had simply forgotten. And then, as I moved deeper into the light, something incredible happened. I began to see my life unfold before me, not as a memory but as a living, breathing reality. It was not just a series of images flashing before my eyes. It was something much deeper, much more powerful. I relived moments I had long forgotten, the choices I had made, the words I had spoken, the pain I had caused, the love I had given. Every interaction, every decision, no matter how small, was laid bare before me. And in that moment, I understood something that had never truly occurred to me in life. Every action, every thought, every emotion mattered. Nothing was insignificant. Every ripple of energy I had put into the world had created an impact on others, on myself, on the very fabric of existence. I saw the people I had hurt, the times I had been selfish, the moments I had let anger or fear dictate my actions. But I also saw the good, the times I had shown kindness, the moments I had chosen love over hate, the small gestures that had meant the world to someone else. And as I watched, I realized something even more profound. I was not being judged. There was no condemnation, no punishment, no voice telling me I had failed. Only understanding, only truth. And then, I became aware of something else. I was not alone. At first, it was just a presence, gentle yet overwhelming, surrounding me in warmth and light. Then, as my awareness expanded, I saw them, beings of light, moving gracefully through the space around me, their forms radiant and pure. They were not human, yet they felt more familiar than anything I had ever known. They didn't speak, at least not with words, but I understood them perfectly. They were watching me, guiding me, welcoming me. And then, as the tunnel of light expanded before me, I saw him. A figure emerged, brighter than anything else, his presence more powerful than anything I had ever encountered. My soul recognized him before my mind could process it. This was no ordinary being. This was something far beyond human understanding. And as he stepped closer, I felt every part of myself laid bare before him. There was no hiding, no pretending. He saw me, all of me. And then, in a voice that was not a voice, he spoke. "Anderson, I have been waiting for you." I knew then, without a doubt, that I was standing before Jesus. The presence before me was unlike anything I had ever encountered. There were no words to truly describe it, no way to contain it within the limits of human language. Jesus stood before me, not just as a figure, but as something far greater, something beyond form yet undeniably real. His presence radiated warmth, love, and a power so immense that it enveloped everything around me. And yet, despite that power, I felt no fear. There was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. It was as if he could see through every layer of my existence, every thought I had ever had, every mistake I had ever made. And yet, he did not turn away. I tried to speak, but words failed me. My mind, still bound by the logic of the physical world, could not comprehend what was happening. But Jesus did not need my words. He understood me, not as a stranger or a subject, but as someone he had always known. His voice resonated within me, not spoken aloud but felt in every fiber of my being. "You are not here by accident," he said. "You have been brought here because you must see." The weight of those words settled deep within me. This was no hallucination. This was no dream. This was something far more real than anything I had ever known. With a single motion of his hand, the space around us shifted. The tunnel of light faded, and suddenly, I was standing in a place I could not recognize yet felt strangely familiar. A vast expanse stretched before me, beyond time, beyond space. It was as if I was standing at the very edge of eternity, peering into something infinite. The air, if it could even be called air, vibrated with energy, pulsing like a living thing. "Look," Jesus said, and as I turned my eyes to the horizon, I saw something that shook me to my core. The world as I had known it was being pulled apart. Cities, nations, people, all moving, all unaware of what was truly happening beneath the surface. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing forces at work that no one could see. Shadows lurked behind leaders, behind governments, behind the systems that controlled every aspect of life. These were not just men making decisions. These were powers beyond human comprehension, guiding, manipulating, shaping the course of history. And at the center of it all was a battle, not of politics, not of nations, but of something far greater, a battle of light and darkness. Jesus turned to me, his expression solemn but steady. "The world believes it is in control," he said, "but they do not see what moves beneath the surface." As he spoke, I saw it more clearly. Figures cloaked in darkness whispering into the ears of those in power, unseen hands shifting the course of economies, wars, and societies. And yet, I also saw something else. A light pushing back against the darkness, small but unwavering. There were those who stood against it, those who still carried the truth, but they were few, and time was running out. I wanted to ask what this meant, what I was supposed to do with what I was seeing. But before I could, Jesus raised his hand again, and the scene shifted once more. The images of the world dissolved, replaced by something even more terrifying. I was no longer watching history unfold. I was seeing the future, and what I saw was beyond anything I could have imagined. A storm was coming. Not just a war, not just a crisis, but something that would shake the very foundation of the world itself. It was not one event, but a series of events, each more devastating than the last. The financial systems that people relied on would crumble. The leaders they trusted would turn against them. Fear would spread like wildfire, consuming entire nations. And at the heart of it all was a deception so great that even those who thought they were prepared would struggle to see the truth. Jesus looked at me, his voice firm, but filled with sorrow. "They will be deceived," because they do not know me." His words sent a chill through me. I wanted to believe that people would wake up, that they would see what was happening before it was too late. But deep down, I knew the truth. Most would not. They would cling to the illusion, to the lies they had been fed, to the false security of a system that was already collapsing. And when the final moment came, they would not be ready. Yet, even as I saw the darkness, Jesus showed me something else. Hope. There were those who would stand, those who would not be shaken. I saw them, scattered across the world, small in number but unbreakable in faith. They did not rely on money, on governments, on technology. They relied only on God. And because of that, they would endure. I turned to Jesus, my voice finally finding its strength. What must I do? The words felt small, insignificant, but he looked at me with the same unwavering love he had from the beginning. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them to prepare, not with wealth, not with power, but with faith." The moment he spoke those words, everything around me began to change. The vision faded, the light dimmed, and suddenly, I was falling back into the world I had once known. The sensation was overwhelming. One moment, I was standing in eternity. The next, I was gasping for air, feeling the weight of my body once more. The pain rushed back, the sounds of sirens, voices shouting, metal groaning beneath the wreckage. I was alive. I had returned. But I was not the same. The world had not changed, but I had. Because now I knew. And now I had a mission. When I opened my eyes, the world around me felt unfamiliar. The sirens, the flashing lights, the hands pulling me from the wreckage, all of it felt distant, like an echo of something that no longer held meaning. I had returned, but I was not the same. My body ached, my mind reeled, but none of it compared to the weight of what I had just witnessed. I had stood in the presence of Jesus. I had seen the truth about this world, and now I had to live with that knowledge. But how could I? How could I walk back into a life that now felt so small, so insignificant? I had seen eternity. I had seen what was coming, and I had been sent back with a purpose. The doctors called it a miracle. They told me I should not have survived the impact, that the injuries I sustained should have been far worse. But I knew the truth. It was not luck. It was not science. It was something far greater. I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at purpose. Yet, as I lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by people who had no idea what I had just experienced, I felt an isolation deeper than anything I had ever known. How could I tell them? How could I make them understand? They lived in a world that had convinced them of a false reality. If I told them the truth, would they listen? Or would they call me insane? Days turned into weeks, and I struggled with the weight of my revelation. I knew what I had to do, but fear held me back. Not fear of death, not anymore, but fear of rejection, of ridicule. I had seen the deception woven into the world, the blindfolds placed over people's eyes. Would they even want to see? The more I thought about it, the more I realized the answer. Most would not. Most were comfortable in their ignorance, unwilling to challenge what they had been conditioned to believe. But there would be some who already felt the cracks forming, who already suspected that something was deeply wrong with the world. Those were the ones I'd been sent back for. The first time I spoke about my experience, it was to a close friend, someone I trusted. I expected disbelief, laughter, maybe even anger. But what I saw instead was something else. Recognition. He didn't mock me. He didn't try to rationalize it away. Instead, he listened. And when I was finished, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite define. "I don't know why," he said, "but I believe you." Those words sent a shiver through me. It was the confirmation I needed. Not everyone would reject the truth. Some were already searching for it, and I had been sent back to help them find it. I began to speak more, slowly at first, cautiously. Each time the reactions were different. Some dismissed me immediately, waving it off as a hallucination. Others listened but struggled to accept it. And then there were those few. Those who leaned in, who asked questions, who felt the weight of what I was saying. They were the ones who mattered. They were the reason I had been sent back. The world was running out of time, and those who were willing to see needed to awaken now. One night, as I lay awake, the words Jesus had spoken to me echoed in my mind. Tell them to prepare. The urgency of it pressed against my soul. The time was not far off. The illusions that held the world in place would soon begin to crumble. And when they did, people would be forced to make a choice, cling to a dying system, or step into the truth. But how could I make them see before it was too late? How could I reach those who were ready? And then I realized I could not convince them. That was not my task. My task was only to speak the truth, to plant the seed, and let them decide whether to open their eyes or remain asleep. I had been given this vision for a reason, not to keep it to myself, not to hide in fear, but to tell the world, no matter the cost, the deception is real, the battle is real, and the time to awaken is now. The first time I saw the world after my return, it looked the same, but I knew it wasn't. Or rather, I wasn't. The people rushing through their daily lives, buried in their routines, completely unaware of what lay beneath the surface. It was as if I was seeing everything through new eyes. I could feel the weight of the illusion that held them captive. The endless pursuit of money, power, distraction. It was all designed to keep them blind. And now that I had seen the truth, I could never unsee it. Everywhere I went, I noticed patterns I had never paid attention to before. The way the news spread fear like a virus, keeping people trapped in a state of anxiety. The way governments manipulated the masses, offering solutions to problems they had created. The way people worshipped material things, believing that wealth or status would save them. But most of all, I saw how desperately people avoided thinking about what truly mattered. Faith, truth, eternity. The things that would remain when everything else was gone. Before my experience, I had been just like them. I had lived my life chasing success, believing that if I just worked harder, earned more, climbed higher, I would find peace. But now, I knew the truth. The entire system was built on a lie, and the moment it collapsed, those who placed their trust in it would collapse with it. Jesus had shown me what was coming, and now, as I watched the world continue on in ignorance, I understood why he had sent me back. There was still time, but not much. I started paying closer attention to the people around me. Some were too far gone, completely absorbed in the illusion, but others, I could see it in their eyes, were already questioning. They felt it, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. They sensed that something was wrong, that the world was shifting, that the ground beneath their feet was not as solid as they had once believed. Those were the ones I was meant to reach. But how do you wake up someone who has been lulled to sleep their entire life? Fear wouldn't work. It would only push them further into denial. Anger wouldn't work. It would only make them defensive. The only thing that could break through was the truth itself, not forced upon them, not shouted at them, but shown to them. That was the answer. I had to live in a way that made them see. I stopped chasing the things that had once consumed me. Money, status, success. None of it mattered anymore. Instead, I focused on faith. I let go of the fears that had once controlled me. I refused to be manipulated by the same tactics that held others captive. And slowly, people began to notice. They asked questions. They wanted to understand. And when they were ready, I told them. Some listened, some walked away, but I had done my part. And as I continued on, I knew that I was not alone. Others like me had seen the truth. Others had been sent back with the same message. We were being called, gathered, prepared, because soon the choice would be made clear to everyone. And once it was, there would be no turning back. The message was clear. The world was approaching a turning point, a moment that would change everything. Jesus had shown me what lay ahead, not in exact dates or details, but in undeniable certainty. The systems that people relied on would fail. The false securities they clung to would crumble. And when that moment arrived, they would have to choose. But the greatest danger was not the collapse itself. It was the deception that would come with it. A new system would rise in the ashes of the old. It would promise safety, stability, control. It would offer people everything they thought they wanted: prosperity, security, a sense of order, but at a price they would not fully understand until it was too late. Jesus had shown me the deception, the way it would unfold, the way people would willingly surrender their freedom for the illusion of peace. And once they did, there would be no escape. They will be deceived, Jesus had told me, because they do not know me. Those words haunted me, because I could already see it happening. The stage was being set. The distractions, the fear, the growing instability. It was all preparing people to accept what was coming. And when the final moment arrived, they would not question it. They would embrace it, because they had been conditioned to. And that is why I had been sent back, to warn them, to tell them to prepare, not with wealth, not with power, but with faith, because soon the illusion would fall, and only those who saw the truth would remain standing. The world around me felt like a stage, every event carefully orchestrated, every crisis designed to push people further into compliance. I saw it clearly now, the way fear was used as a weapon, the way people were made to believe they needed saving, only to be led deeper into control. And yet, even as the deception grew stronger, I saw something else rising alongside it. An awakening. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. People were beginning to question. They were beginning to see, and that terrified those in power. It started small, whispers of doubt, moments of realization, cracks forming in the illusion that had held the world in place for so long. Some people ignored it, too afraid to acknowledge the truth, but others leaned in, searching for answers, desperate to understand what they had always felt but never quite grasped. These were the ones who mattered. These were the ones who still had time, and I knew, deep in my soul, that my purpose was to reach them before it was too late. But time was slipping away. The deception was accelerating. Everything Jesus had shown me was beginning to unfold, and the world was too distracted to notice. It was as if a great storm was approaching, but instead of preparing, people were celebrating, blind to the warning signs flashing all around them. The systems they trusted were failing. The leaders they relied on were revealing their true nature. The very foundation of their reality was beginning to shake. And yet, they clung to it, desperate to believe that everything was still under control. That was the greatest lie of all. The belief that someone else would fix it, that the world would simply correct itself, that things would go back to normal. But there was no going back. The shift had already begun. The only choice now was to see the truth or remain in denial. And for those who refused to wake up, the coming collapse would be devastating. Not because of what they would lose, but because of what they would willingly give away in their desperation to hold on to the illusion. The warnings were everywhere, but only those with eyes to see could recognize them. The financial instability, the rising tensions between nations, the increasing surveillance, the suppression of truth. These were not random events. They were pieces of a much larger plan, and those who orchestrated it were counting on people to remain blind. They were counting on fear to drive them into submission. But Jesus had shown me that fear was a choice, and those who refused to be controlled by it would be the ones who endured. That was why I could no longer stay silent. Every day that passed, I felt the urgency growing within me, pushing me to speak, to warn, to prepare. Not everyone would listen, not everyone would believe, but I could not allow that to stop me. The truth was the truth, regardless of how many rejected it, and I had been sent back to deliver it no matter the cost. So I began to speak louder. I stopped worrying about who would accept it and who would not. That was no longer my burden to carry. My task was simple: to make them aware, to let them know that the choice was coming whether they were ready for it or not, and that once it arrived, there would be no middle ground. You would either stand in truth, or you would fall with the lie. As I spoke out, the reactions were exactly as I had expected. Some dismissed me outright, unwilling to even consider the possibility that everything they had been told was a lie. Others listened but refused to accept it, clinging to the belief that things were not as bad as they seemed. But then there were the others, the ones who had already begun to sense that something was wrong, the ones who had spent their entire lives feeling like something was off, but had never been able to put it into words. They were the ones who leaned in, who asked questions, who felt the weight of what I was saying in their very souls. These were the ones I had been sent back for, not the ones who had already chosen their side, but the ones who were still searching, the ones who had not yet been fully consumed by the deception, the ones who still had a chance. I could see it in their eyes, the way they wrestled with the truth, the way their minds tried to fight against what their souls already knew. And I understood why. Accepting the truth meant letting go of everything they had ever believed. It meant stepping into the unknown, abandoning the false security they had built their lives upon. And for many, that was simply too much to bear. But some did accept it. Some saw the cracks in the illusion and dared to look beyond them. They were afraid, yes, but they did not let fear stop them. They began to ask the right questions. They began to notice the signs. They began to prepare. And that was all that mattered, because the ones who prepared now would be the ones who endured when the final moment came. Jesus had not shown me everything. He had not given me dates or details, but he had given me certainty. The moment of decision was approaching, and when it arrived, the entire world would be forced to choose. Most would follow the deception, believing it to be salvation. But those who had been warned, those who had prepared, they would stand, and nothing, no force of darkness, no illusion of power, would be able to shake them. I felt a deep sorrow for those who would not see in time. I knew many would reject the warnings. Many would mock those who tried to wake them. And when the truth was finally undeniable, it would be too late for them to turn back. That was the tragedy of deception. It did not simply blind people. It convinced them they were already awake. And so I kept speaking. I kept warning. I kept reaching out to those who were still searching, knowing that every soul who awakened now was one less soul lost when the moment of decision came. That was my mission. That was why I had been sent back. And nothing, no ridicule, no rejection, no fear, would stop me from fulfilling it. The signs were becoming impossible to ignore. What Jesus had shown me was not some distant future. It was unfolding now. The systems people had trusted for so long were beginning to fail. The world was unraveling piece by piece, yet still, people refused to see it. They believed the media, the politicians, the experts, anyone who told them that everything was under control. But it wasn't. It never had been. And soon, the illusion would be impossible to maintain. The financial collapse was already underway, though most people didn't realize it yet. Governments were making promises they could not keep, printing money that had no value, indebting their citizens to a system designed to enslave them. The institutions people relied on were turning against them, stripping away freedoms under the guise of protection. And all the while, the deception grew stronger, convincing people that the only way to survive was to submit, to comply. But Jesus had shown me what was coming next. The collapse would not be the end. It would be the beginning of something even greater. Out of the ashes, a new system would rise, one that promised stability, safety, prosperity. It would appear to be the solution to every problem the world faced. And people would embrace it, beg for it, because they had been conditioned to believe it was the only way. But it was a lie, a final deception, greater than anything that had come before. And those who saw it for what it truly was, those who refused to bow to it, would become the enemy. They would be labeled as threats, as obstacles to progress. They would be ridiculed, silenced, cast out. And then, the real battle would begin. Not a battle of nations, not a battle of armies, but a battle for the soul of humanity itself. The final test, the ultimate choice. Jesus' words echoed in my mind, more urgent than ever. Tell them to prepare, not with wealth, not with power, but with faith, because soon, the world as they knew it would no longer exist. And when that moment arrived, only those who had built their foundation on truth would remain standing. Everywhere I looked, I saw the deception tightening its grip. People were willingly giving away their freedoms, their autonomy, their very ability to think for themselves, all in exchange for comfort, for security, for the illusion that everything was still under control. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't understand what was coming. They were being led step by step into a new system, one that had been designed long before they ever realized they were trapped in it. And the most terrifying part? They weren't being forced into it. They were choosing it. That was the brilliance of the deception. It did not need violence. It did not need war. It only needed fear. People who are afraid will accept anything, so long as it promises relief. And that was exactly what was happening. Fear of collapse, fear of instability, fear of being left behind, fear of not having enough. It was all carefully crafted, carefully controlled. leading them straight into the final trap. The moment was approaching when the world would be offered a solution, a new system, a new order, a new way forward. And most would embrace it without question, believing it to be their salvation. But those who did, they would be walking willingly into their enslavement. Jesus had shown me the truth behind it all. The system that controlled the world had never been about money or power. It had always been about domination. The illusion of choice had been carefully maintained, making people believe they had control over their lives, their futures. But in reality, every path they took led them deeper into the same web. Now, the final stage of that plan was unfolding. The world would be pushed to the brink, economically, socially, politically, until people were desperate enough to demand change. And when that moment came, the ones in control would step forward with the answer they had prepared all along. It would not seem like a prison at first. It would seem like the greatest advancement in human history. A world without economic instability, without division, without scarcity. A world where everything was provided for you, where all you had to do was comply. The masses would celebrate it, believing they had finally found peace. But those who could see, those who understood what was really happening, would know the truth. This was not peace. This was submission. And once you gave yourself to it, there would be no turning back. That was why I had been sent back. Not to stop what was coming, because it would come. It had already begun. My task was only to warn, to prepare those who still had eyes to see, to make them understand that they could not put their trust in this system, in this illusion. Their only refuge, their only true security, was in something greater. It was in the truth, and the truth would cost them everything. But that was the test. That was the choice that was coming. Would they hold on to what was comfortable, what was easy, what felt safe? Or would they step into the unknown, into faith, into something the world had tried so hard to make them forget? That decision would determine everything. And once it was made, there would be no second chances. I could already see how people would react. Some would hear the warning and dismiss it immediately. They would call it fear-mongering, paranoia, the ranting of someone who had lost touch with reality. And in a way, they were right. I had lost touch with their reality, because I had seen beyond it. I had seen what lay beneath the surface. And once you see it, you can never go back. You can never unsee the chains that had been placed around you. The only question was whether you would break free or pretend they weren't there. The worst deception of all was that people believed they were free. They believed they were making their own choices, that they were the ones in control of their destinies. But I had been shown the truth. They had never been free. They had been guided, manipulated, conditioned. The choices they made were never truly theirs. They had been given to them, carefully selected to ensure that no matter which path they took, they would remain inside the system. But soon, they would be given a final choice, one that would not be reversible, and the world would not be ready for it. I struggled with the weight of this knowledge. I wanted to believe that people would see the truth before it was too late. I wanted to believe that they would wake up. But Jesus had shown me that most would not. Most would continue down the path they had always walked, convinced that they were in control, convinced that they knew what was best. And when the moment of decision came, they would choose comfort. They would choose security. They would choose the lie. But there would be others. I had seen them, scattered across the world, small in number, but unshakable in faith. They would not bow to the deception. They would not surrender to fear. They would stand, even when the world called them foolish, even when they were mocked, ridiculed, cast out. They would stand because they knew. They understood what was at stake. They understood that this was not just about politics or economics or survival. This was about eternity. Those were the ones I had been sent back for. The ones who were still searching, still questioning, still willing to see. They were the ones who could still prepare, who could still choose truth over illusion. And I knew that every word I spoke, every warning I gave was for them, not for the masses, not for those who had already chosen their path, but for the few who still had time, because time was running out. One night as I sat in silence reflecting on everything I had seen, I felt the weight of Jesus' words settle deep within my soul. Tell them to prepare, not with wealth, not with power, but with faith. I had repeated those words to myself 1,000 times, and yet each time they carried new meaning. They were not just a warning, they were a command, a call to action, a final plea before the moment of choice arrived. But how do you prepare for something the world refuses to acknowledge? How do you stand when everything around you is designed to make you fall? That was the question I wrestled with. And then, the answer came, as clear as the voice that had spoken to me in the light. You do not prepare with fear. You do not prepare with plans of escape. You prepare with faith. Because when the moment comes, when the world is forced to decide, faith will be the only thing left standing. The world had taught people to trust in everything except faith. In money, in governments, in technology, in science. But all of it would fail. Every false foundation would crumble. And when it did, those who had placed their trust in it would crumble with it. That was the final deception. Not that people would be forced to choose, but that they would not realize they were choosing until it was too late. I had seen the desperation that was coming, the fear, the panic, the moment when people would realize that everything they had believed in was a lie. And in that moment, they would reach out for anything that promised security, anything that offered stability. And that is when the final trap would be sprung. The new system, the new way forward, the solution to all of their problems. And the world would embrace it. I felt a deep sorrow, not for what was coming, but for those who would walk into it willingly, never realizing what they had done. Because once they made their choice, there would be no undoing it. The moment would pass, and eternity would be sealed. That was why I had to speak. That was why I had been sent back. Because for some, there was still time. For some, the warning would be heard. And for those who listened, for those who chose faith over fear, truth over illusion, light over darkness, they would not be shaken. No matter what came next, there was no stopping what was coming. That was the first truth I had to accept. No amount of resistance, no political movement, no human effort could change the course of what had already been set in motion. The world had chosen its path long ago, and now the final steps were being taken. The deception had grown too strong, the system too deeply embedded. It was not a question of if the collapse would come. It was a question of when. And when it did, those who were not prepared would be consumed by it. But preparation was not what people thought it was. It was not about stockpiling money, hoarding supplies, or finding a place to hide. That was another lie, another illusion designed to make people believe they could control what was coming. The truth was, no one would be able to escape it. Not physically, not financially, not by any earthly means. The only way to withstand what was ahead was to prepare in the one way the world had taught them to ignore: spiritually. Faith was the only foundation that would not be shaken, the only protection that would not fail. Everything else, wealth, power, security, was temporary. And when the final deception came, when the world was offered its last chance to submit, none of those things would save them. They would be given a choice, and the choice would come at a cost. To stand in truth would mean losing everything they had built their lives upon: their jobs, their homes, their reputations, even their safety. But to accept the lie would cost them something far greater: their very souls. That was the weight of the moment that was approaching. That was the choice that every person would soon have to make. Would they cling to the world, to the illusion of security, and surrender themselves in exchange for comfort? Or would they stand in faith, even when it cost them everything? Jesus had shown me what that choice would look like, and I knew that for many, it would be too much to bear. Most people would take the easier road. They would justify it to themselves, convince themselves that they had no other option, that survival was more important than truth. But there would be some who would not bow, some who would see the deception for what it was and refuse to take part in it. And those few, scattered, outnumbered, abandoned by the world, would be the ones who endured, because their strength would not come from themselves. It would not come from their own ability to resist. It would come from the one thing the world had rejected: faith. This was the preparation that mattered, not gathering resources, not making escape plans, but strengthening the one thing that could not be taken away: their trust in God, their willingness to let go of everything but the truth. Because when the world demanded their loyalty, when the final choice was placed before them, there would be no room for hesitation. And only those who had already made their decision in their hearts would be able to stand. The weight of what I had seen never left me. Every day as I walked through the world, I felt it pressing down on me. The knowledge of what was coming, the realization that most people were not ready for it. I wanted to shake them, to make them understand. But I knew that forcing the truth on those who were not willing to see would do nothing. They had to choose it. They had to seek it. And most of them wouldn't, not until it was too late. That was the greatest tragedy of all. The warnings were there. The signs were everywhere. But people did not want to see them. They wanted to believe in the illusion. They wanted to believe that everything would be fine, that life would continue as it always had. They ignored the cracks forming beneath their feet, convinced that if they just kept moving forward, the ground would hold. But it wouldn't. It never could. Because the very foundation they had built their lives upon was already collapsing. I had to accept that I could not save them. That was the hardest part. I had been sent back to warn, to prepare, but not to force anyone to listen. That was not my job. My job was to speak, to tell the truth, to reach those who were still willing to hear it, and then to let go, to release those who refused to listen, knowing that once the moment came, their choice would already be made. But I could not let their rejection silence me. That was another trick, another way the deception worked. It made those who spoke the truth feel like they were alone. It made them believe that their words didn't matter, that no one was listening. It tried to isolate them, to wear them down, to make them give up. But I knew the truth. I had seen it. I had stood in it. And no lie, no mockery, no rejection could take that from me. So I kept going. I kept speaking. I kept reaching out to those who still had time. Not because I believed I could change the course of the world, but because I knew that every person who did listen mattered. Every soul that awakened was one less soul lost when the final deception arrived. And that was all I could do. That was why I had been sent back. Time was slipping away. The moment was closer than anyone realized. And soon, the choice would no longer be something they could avoid. It would be placed before them, and they would have to decide. And once that decision was made, there would be no turning back. One night, as I sat in silence, I thought about what would happen when the final moment arrived. I thought about the people who would stand and the ones who would fall. I thought about those who had listened and those who had ignored the warnings. And I realized something. This was always how it had to be. There was never going to be a mass awakening. There was never going to be a moment when the entire world saw the truth. That was not how the deception worked. It was not meant to be obvious. It was meant to be chosen. That was the final test. Not whether the truth would be revealed, but whether people would seek it, whether they would want it. And the heartbreaking reality was that most wouldn't. They would choose the world. They would choose the lie, because the truth required something they were not willing to give. Surrender. Surrender of their comforts, their pride, their very sense of control. And for most, that was too high a price. But for those who did choose truth, who did choose faith, something incredible would happen. They would not only endure what was coming, they would rise above it. The collapse would not break them. The deception would not shake them, because they had never placed their trust in the world to begin with. Their foundation had been built on something eternal, and that meant they could never be taken down. That was why I had been sent back. That was why I had been shown what was coming. Not to stop it, but to prepare those who were meant to withstand it, to give them the final warning before the moment arrived, to tell them that the choice was near, and once it came, there would be no more time for hesitation. I could feel it in my soul. The moment was close. The deception was nearly complete. The stage had been set, the final act about to begin. And when it did, the entire world would be forced to make its decision. No one would escape it. No one would be able to ignore it. The illusion would fall, and reality would be revealed. And in that moment, every person would have to choose. Light or darkness, truth or deception, faith or fear. And once they did, eternity would remember their decision. This is the truth I was sent back to tell. The world as we know it is changing, and soon, every person will have to make a choice. There will be no middle ground, no waiting for things to return to normal, no pretending that everything is fine. The illusion is already crumbling, and when it finally collapses, those who have not prepared will be caught in its fall. But those who have strengthened their faith, who have opened their eyes, who have chosen to stand in truth, They will not be shaken. You must understand this. The choice is not coming in some distant future. It is already here. Every day you are being conditioned to trust in the wrong things, to build your life on a foundation that will not last. The time to wake up is now. The time to prepare is now. Because when the final deception arrives, there will be no more warnings, no second chances, only the reality of the decision you have already made. Do not wait until it is too late. Strengthen your faith today. Seek the truth today. Let go of the fears that keep you tied to this world and put your trust where it belongs, in Jesus Christ. Because when the world demands your loyalty, when it tells you that you must conform to its ways or be cast out, the only thing that will keep you standing is the truth you chose to believe in long before that moment arrived. I do not say these things to scare you. I say them because I have seen what is coming, and I know that those who are prepared will endure. Jesus did not send me back to give you false hope. He sent me back to give you the only hope that matters, the hope that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, those who stand in faith will never be abandoned. Those who trust in Him will never be forsaken, and those who follow Him will never be lost. If you feel this message stirring something inside you, if you know deep down that what I am saying is true, do not ignore it. That is not fear, it is awareness. It is your soul recognizing the truth. Follow that. Do not let the distractions of this world pull you back into blindness. Choose now, before the choice is made for you. Stay connected, stay engaged, keep seeking. Subscribe to this channel, not just to hear more, but to walk this journey with me. Follow Jesus, strengthen your faith, share this message with those who need to hear it. Because the time is short, and every soul that awakens now is one less soul lost when the deception reaches its final form. You are not alone in this. We are in this together. I am here for you. And more importantly, Jesus is here for you. No matter where you are, no matter what you have done, no matter how far you feel from the truth, it is never too late to turn back. But the time to act is now. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for opening your heart to the truth. Stay strong, stay faithful, and above all, stay ready. Because when the moment comes, those who are prepared will not fear. They will stand, and they will overcome.